Reform UK are rocketing up in the polls, which is always nice to see since Nigel Farage came back and decided to be a lightning rod for discontented young men like me who have been bereaved of a cultural inheritance and the ability to buy a home. What was it, 1997? It was 3 times the average house price?
4 times.
Now it's 11 times because something happened. Anyway, so it's not just a flash in the pan because we had this poll with YouGov a little while ago, last week, and this is where, for the first time, Reform had eclipsed the Conservatives in the polls. I think the Conservatives were at something like 18%, Reform became 19%, so Farage's statement that he will become the opposition, even if not in the plurality of seats because of our electoral system, but at least the popular opposition, seems to be true. And now we have another one, turns out. There's a Redfield and Wilton Strategies one that came out, I think, 2 days ago, and Conservatives are down to 18%, and Reform are now neck and neck with them.
I saw one this morning that showed that they were leading in Wales above the Conservatives and obviously behind Labour. Labour have gone from something like 51% to 31% in Wales, and Reform are up to 17%. So Reform are actually the opposition in Wales now.
I mean, if you remove London and Scotland, Reform are beating them everywhere else.
It's great.
Yeah, it's worth saying one other thing about this, by the way, which is, it is true that Reform and Tory are in some ways substitutes, but there are a lot of voters who are pissed off with the Tories who would have not voted at all. And who might have voted for Labour. So in that sense, those voters going to Reform takes votes away from Labour as well. So that's worth bearing in mind.
That's what happened in UKIP in 2015, I believe, as well.
And also, just getting out the resigned voters, the people who are just like, well, I'm not going to vote at all, giving them something they want to vote for hurts Labour as well.
Yeah.
Labour is sort of like looking at this, full house or whatever, because people are just going to stay home because I'm not voting for the Tories and there's no one else, so I'm just not going to vote. Well, now there's something for them to do. It's fantastic.
Well, that's been their Ming Vaz strategy of not disclosing too much about their manifesto plans, which are going to be very radical, and they're going to put up taxes through a sneaky way because they just think they can carry it across the finish line and win by default. And now Farage has come in, and I think Matt Goodwin put it about 6 in 10 people who voted in 2019 for the Conservatives just weren't going to vote until recently. They're going to galvanise that base and a lot of young people, and it seems like they're going to translate it into some seats.
Well, that young people point is interesting. I don't know if you saw Matt's Substack recently where he showed that amongst Zoomers, actually it was over twice as many were going to vote Reform as Tory. 15% versus 7%. And that really hit me like, wow, okay, so they're making an impact amongst younger people.
Do you know something was really interesting? When I was doing the 2019 MEP campaign, we got a poll through that showed that 14% of 18 to 25 were going to vote UKIP. And Callum was with me at the time. He just looked over and goes, look, we've done our job. And it's like, yeah, that's what we were there for, And so it's interesting that younger people are just like, look, we do not buy into the sort of post-World War II consensus on politics. It's not just Labour and Tory. We're prepared to go elsewhere. And that's fantastic because up until this point, we've had really, feudal voting in this country where it's just like, oh no, I'm Conservative. My grandfather was Conservative. My great-grandfather was Conservative or Labour, and we've always voted Labour. And these things are actually starting to break apart now. And we're actually seeing some light emerge through the clouds, which is fantastic.
But there's an open letter for people that are saying the sort of Reform youth chapter, if they start one, because the Young Conservatives chapter has been very successful, unfortunately, in picking some sort of like wet careerist candidates, but if you start one with the principles of Reform and also saying if you do some policies that go towards enterprising young people getting a home and making good on those recent manifesto promises to have families, single income payer families, then we'll renounce all prior party memberships and specifically join you in campaign for you. And it's getting a lot of traction. I tweeted out the other day and there's quite a few thousand people going, oh, sounds good. So the energy is there. It's encouraging. That's there as well. So if you want to sign that open letter, it's linked down in the description. So naturally, as soon as they come along and actually, do some proper sort of reactive conservatism for once, the smears start rolling in. And the label far right has lost a lot of its power now because they've cried wolf so many times. But I thought I'd just go through a few that have come out in the last week against Nigel Farage, who's a big boy and can take it, and then some of the candidates, and I think they're just getting a bit tiresome. So here's one. David Aaronovitch, who's on BBC Radio 4. So Matt tweeted out, oppose mass immigration, embed national preference, take on radical woke progressivism, oppose luxury belief class, and return to fiscal conservatism as some of the 5 principles that Reform are going for. And David decided to translate that to deport Somalis, gays back in closet, cut benefits to the poor.
What?
Based.
Well, did you see? I sort of then retweeted David, which actually got reasonably good pickup, and I sort of said, translation, deporting illegal immigrants is racist, number one. And the second thing is that so essentially what I was trying to say is we can play this game of exaggerating what the other person says, and that is a tactic that's quite popular amongst mainstream liberals. Yeah.
Just a quick thing. I mean, in what way does Matt Goodwin's statement mention gays? Do gays not oppose mass immigration? I mean, I think they've actually got lots of good reasons to oppose mass immigration from certain areas of the world.
Well, that's a point that I talk about in the book. Is one of the key components is this idea of what I call fascist scare. So we have this term called Red Scare, right, which is McCarthyism. Yeah. This idea of fascist scare that if you give an inch on anything to do with culture, we're going to have gays back in the closet, women back in the home. We're going to have, Jim Crow segregation again, or Nazism 1933. And they've been able to essentially get away with that. And that's accepted. It's not seen as the same as a Red Scare, but it is.
But ironically, it's that lack of ability to sort of give any grounds to the conservative side that caused Nazism to flourish and succeed anyway in Germany.
Well,
it was the fact that they took everything to its most radical left-wing position, disgusted people and made them think, okay, maybe this Hitler guy's making a point. Not that we want this, of course, but the point is you can't have it just all one way and think that the people on the right you've just got to accept the most radical left-wing position on everything. It's like they don't and they won't.
Right, yeah. But I mean, this is my point about left liberalism, though, is that it's actually got a check on the economic side. It believes in markets, but also redistribution. Comes out moderate. Whereas on the cultural stuff, there are no boundaries at all. Yeah. And so it is just catastrophism all the way down. And we can only progress. Yeah. And if we stop moving, then we're suddenly going to give way to fascism. And that has been the storyline. And there's just no ability to have a conversation. That's why immigration is so impossible. That's why talking about LGBT is so impossible, because it's just maximalism or nothing for them.
Well, this is what the term far right is meant to do. It's meant to be a fill in the blank, because as soon as you actually unpack what they think far right is, it's the most absurd caricature. Or if they say fascism or Nazism, well, that's implacable to the particular history and conditions of the UK, because we actually, in particularly the post-war paradigm, prides itself upon being, particularly Nigel Farage, going to the D-Day celebrations every year, prides itself upon being the nations where that didn't flourish and it was actively repudiated. So if you called us National Socialists from 1930s Germany, we'd be able to laugh it off because it's so absurd. But now they're just going to far right, and so they try to hope that people hear that and hear the dog whistle as being Nazi and smear you. But even that's just lost its rhetorical power now.
Well, it's worth saying, by the way, these taboos, they have moved, as you say. So, for example, in Europe, like in Sweden, the interior minister tried to talk about immigration levels in 2014, was attacked as a racist in the press. And then what happens? The Sweden Democrats say, okay, fine, it's a taboo. We're going to break that taboo. Once they break the taboo, then all the mainstream parties then say, actually, we're going to start talking about immigration too. And so that's what's happened. So France, Le Pen, when Jean-Marie won in, I think it was 2001, you had like 1 million people out on the streets protesting. And he was on 18%. Marine is on her way to, presidency, or essentially their numbers are in the 40s, not a peep. So that the point is that these things do shift the Overton window.
You can even see it with the Labour and Conservative parties at the moment. They're both campaigning on an anti-immigration platform.
Ed Davey said the other day that immigration's too high.
Even the Lib Dems, really? No way. I didn't see that.
It's only the Greens and the SNP and Plaid Cymru that are like, yes, infinite immigrants, right. Please.
And so, like, Farage has done a great job of just shifting that Overton window, saying, no, immigration is bad and we're going to reduce it. So fantastic.
Yeah, and this scaremongering, again, clearly isn't washing, because Brian Cox, the lesser of the two Hannibal Lecters, went on, what was it, Laura Kuenssberg's show on Sunday, and he said, I find Nigel Farage slightly fascist, frankly. And was just,
what does that mean?
It's just a little bit of jackbooting.
Yeah, just slightly fascist.
Yeah, he just likes the uniforms and the flash cars, I'm sure. And then there was Lord Hesseltine, who I like the dig that Nigel Farage made in 2017, is that the last time he came out against Brexit, because he's president of something called the European Movement Organisation to constantly bring us back into the EU. Mm-hmm. In 2017, Nigel Farage responded to a clip of Hesseltine complaining about him then and said, "Oh, good, someone's interned him from the National History Museum." I'm just gonna play this because some of the accusations he makes are, again, that's sort of like very boomer era hyper absurd caricatures that just aren't washing.
The reason why the parties won't talk about the detail is because of the emergence of what was UKIP is now Reform. It is the voice of Nigel Farage. And frankly, we've had all this before. We saw it in the 1930s when Mosley marched with his black shirts. We saw it in the 1960s when Enoch Powell made that infamous speech. And now we've seen it again in UKIP and Reform.
You would put Nigel Farage and Richard Tice on par with the likes of Enoch Powell and Mosley?
Yes, of course, because what they are doing is exploiting that human anxiety that comes from something that is slightly different. And this is not new for us. Across the world, you can see tribalism and racism tearing communities apart to this day. And it is the easiest thing when you have economic pressure in a society, and we have, let's be frank, life is pretty difficult economically at the moment for many, many people. So you've got to find someone to blame. And that's when the Farage team move in.
All right, Grandad, thank you very much.
Sorry, just a quick thing. It's like, yeah, look, we can see all of these cultural conflicts around the world that are really dangerous and really hurting people. So we need to bring them all into our country to make sure they're all here so we can manage them. What's the plan? You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, these tropes, really, it's very interesting. It's basically all about this, what I would call fascist scare, right? And the idea that essentially you should fear majorities. Any compromise on cultural issues is a slippery slope to fascism. So that's kind of, I mean, it's a well-worn trope, really.
The hilarious thing as well is that Mosley and the people have been posting ever since the EU election swung massively right. This photo of the photo of Mosley in Trafalgar Square at a rally saying we need closer ties with the EU. It's like, thank you, Mr. Hesseltine, as the expert on Oswald Mosley's policies here. You know,
Enoch Powell wasn't a fascist; he was a member of the Conservative Party.
Until
he was the most popular member.
Until he was turfed out.
Right, but it is interesting, this whole question of immigration, right? I mean, essentially on immigration, there's no such thing as an accommodation. It's basically you're either an open, quote-unquote, person or you're a closed, quote-unquote, person, in which case you're a Nazi and fascist and Mosley supporter and everything else. There's just no flexibility. It's a very binary, totalizing worldview. And that's one of the problems with the left. The only way they will move is when facts on the ground move, as I mentioned with Le Pen. There's a new reality. Okay, maybe we have to adjust a little bit because there's a new reality. We have to talk about immigration. That's the only way they're going to change. Otherwise, it's the same old slogans that'll come out.
Another thing as well is that Nigel Farage has been in politics for 30 years. He's a very known quantity. And what he obviously is a British patriot and Englishman. He's obviously not, for anyone who doesn't know, fascism is essentially the totalization of society under the auspices of the state, and the state acts like a kind of god over society. That's obviously not Farage's opinion at all, in any way, shape, or form.
It just doesn't really suit the British character either.
Exactly. It obviously doesn't suit Farage's character. I mean, there's a reason that he's making free speech one of the main pillars of his manifesto. This is not a fascist principle. There's no... don't know why I have to say that.
I've been doing some reading and I was shocked to discover.
Yeah, bizarrely, it's not in their doctrine. Nigel Farage just isn't a fascist. Like, that's the thing. They can say, well, feels, but no, he's not, and you're wrong. It's just literally the only thing that, I mean, I've read all the fascist doctrines. I know exactly what they thought. Nigel Farage is just, if anything, the opposite of these things. He doesn't want a totalitarian state.
But these words are just stretched and manipulated. We know that. I mean, it's interesting because there is, a guy called David Rosado, who's really does a lot of interesting work on big data. The use of the term far or extreme in front of the word right has soared in the press since about 2010. It's been an explosion. Now, there's been some increase in the use of far and extreme left, but much less so. So there has been this explosion, and now there's just this hair trigger. As soon as you see anything that smells of any kind of cultural conservatism, you just go in on far right. That's it.
I mean, I see them describing you it, him it, me it, the entire organization, like everything. Everything's extreme, mega hard, far right. Right. It's like, okay, can we just get to the that's a good thing part, please?
We don't even agree on everything. I mean,
because like if what I think that we've got a relative concordance on what would be good for the country is we need to reduce immigration, maybe reduce some taxes, maybe get people off benefits slightly if that's all right to get them back to work.
Have kids.
If that's mega extreme, hard, far right, then they are still good things, even if that's how you label them. Okay, you're not calling us Nazis because we're not Nazis. We are just conservative, and okay, well, that's a good thing. That's fine. I'm not bothered by the label. I'm bothered by the fact that you're not doing any of these good things.
Well, yeah, so much of the discussion, though, is underpinned by this kind of moral, emotional, unseen order, and I, in the book, I talk about essentially majority's bad, minority's good. So you have a very negative, fearful approach to majority politics. And you have these narratives, Nazi, Jim Crow, whatever, slavery, gays
All
in the
foreign
closet.
narratives, interesting.
Right, yeah.
Foreign narratives.
Yeah, but they have an emotional pickup,
Yeah.
right? So when you wheel that out, you get an emotional surge. So a lot of this is about playing games with the moral emotions of people and working them up.
I just find it really interesting they can't hark back to British history to do that, right? So, you've got to worry about that thing in Germany. What, the thing we defeated? Yeah, I'm not bothered about that. You've got to worry about slavery in America. What, that thing we defeated? Yeah, I'm not worried about that, actually. We seem to have been on the right side of all those arguments, actually. And so don't bother importing these weird foreign things that we were against over to here to us. We're against these things, Call me a nativist if you like. But
well, that's why none of these smears are working. That's why Michael Heseltine seems like a total dinosaur. So what seems to be happening is some forces might have tried to subvert with reform from within. This is the allegation that's been made in the last day or so. So they decided to pay a vetting firm, and the vetting firm is vetting.com, and it's owned by a gentleman named Colin Bloom, and he worked under Boris Johnson as the Conservative Party's faith engagement advisor. He was made a CBE in Johnson's honours list and then resigned when Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. And the allegation is that they spent about £144,000 on vetting software, and that it wasn't done properly. Now,
could have paid me. I would have done.
Well, I was going to say, hope not hate we're doing it for free.
Yeah, so, Richard Tice was proud of that.
That was a bad strategy.
A few false positives, but hey,
yeah, quite. Yeah. So they've now decided they're probably going to take legal action against this. Of course, the firm themselves have turned around and said that, don't worry, we just couldn't complete the checks in time. It's not our fault because the election was called, and we are politically neutral. There is no such thing, it turns out. And Richard has given a statement to this and says a professional vetting company was paid a six-figure sum in April to vet reform candidates. They promised a deep dive, particularly on social media and adverse press checks, received our candidate data, but then absolutely delivered nothing. Suddenly, a round of stories appear in the Times and elsewhere after nominations close, including some stories that are 15 years old. Something feels very wrong, and I've instructed lawyers to pursue this matter vigorously. So, it isn't that they necessarily let dodgy candidates slip through the net, because frankly all sorts of people can have all sorts of views and anything can be taken out of context on the internet, and this is something that's going to, in the next few years, with Zoomers that have fun and make memes, this is going to be it's going to become another nothing burger, like the term far right. The allegation is around the leaks and the strategic campaign to smear them in the press. And the reason I raise this article is because they mention in this Telegraph article one of the hit pieces in question, and it's on Jack Aaron, and they say, quote, he described Hitler as brilliant at using personality traits to inspire people to action. Now, I highlight this as an appalling hit piece because Jack Aaron is a viewer of ours.
Hello, Jack.
Yes, turns out, yes. Many reform candidates are actually viewers of ours because they're sort of like moderate, patriotic, right-thinking people. Would you like to find out exactly what Jack said? Because this is mad.
Can we read that quote out again, just very quickly?
Yes. Jack Aaron, who described Hitler as brilliant at using personality traits to inspire people to action.
Okay, how's that not true? How is it not true that Hitler was brilliant at using personality traits to inspire people to action? Like that's how he took over the country. That's literally how he got stadiums of people to listen to him ranting and raving. Like, to say that Hitler wasn't a charismatic orator is to simply deny the truth of what happened. That doesn't mean he wasn't the enemy. That doesn't mean he wasn't evil. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have gone into World War II. It's like saying Napoleon was a brilliant general. Yeah, of course he was a brilliant general, but he was still the enemy. We have to be aware of the facts on the ground.
Well, this is, of course, the gotcha technique where a person makes an analytical statement, an empirical statement about the world. You translate that into, no, they're making a normative.
It's an endorsement.
Moral statement, endorsing. Yeah. And it's the oldest trick. I don't know if you saw, there was that monk debate recently with Douglas Murray and Mehdi Hassan, but Hassan tried that on a couple of occasions and was called out pretty nicely by, it wasn't Murray, but his debating partner sort of went through the entire quote and made Mehdi look like an idiot. That's all over.
Mehdi is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do that here because, so I've actually spoken to reform candidates in the last couple of days, and I've learned some information about Jack himself. Turns out that Jack would be funny if he was a Hitler supporter. He teaches a Sunday school class at his local synagogue.
Average Hitler support.
Yeah. What's quite strange, actually, is in Welling Hatfield, the sea, right?
Yeah.
All the three main candidates are Jewish.
Yeah.
So it's Grant Shapps, Andrew Lewin, and Jack Aaron.
Oh,
Not the biggest place for the National Front to me, I don't think. But there you go. Okay, so this is Jack's quote. Okay, he responded to the Times.
sorry, just something. Imagine that though. You know, like it's just okay. I have given a historical critique of Hitler, which is accurate, and then suddenly you, as a Jewish man, are being called a Nazi by the press. You just come on.
I'm glad they refute their own credibility in such an obvious way. So he said to the Times, yes, Hitler was as brilliant as he was utter evil. How is that controversial to say, given that he was also able to turn Germans to such destructive acts, including killing many members of my own family? I strongly believe as a psychologist in separating intelligence and talent from morality so we can adequately diagnose these problems and help people. And that's why you're a racist. Like, it's just,
That's a totally reasonable assessment.
yes, quite. Yeah. And he said, by no means am I saying that Hitler or Putin or Bashar al-Assad are good people that we should admire. They range from the absolutely ingenious evil to wannabe warlord to weak man born into a brutal regime of death and destruction. Because they were also alleging that he said that Putin's use of force made rational sense, which obviously it did if he felt that he was like, you don't have to support the Russians or the Ukrainians to say that in his own mind, he's not insane. He's just making logical steps for what he thinks is the geopolitical reality.
Yes.
And he said that Bashar al-Assad was weaker because he wasn't trying to be a regional tyrant.
Yeah,
He was just locked in a civil war.
yeah.
That's
It's ISIS.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
that's about it. The fascinating thing,
What's this guy said that's
It's a
offensive?
nothing burger. Isn't it?
yeah,
It's
the fascinating thing I found in here was another smear that they tried to use. Aaron has also been supportive of the right-wing influencer Carl Benjamin, also known as Son of a Cad.
now I know you're a bad guy, Aaron.
Now, the thing is, they haven't pointed out anything that you've said.
Oh, really?
They also mentioned the Liz Truss interview.
Yeah.
But they haven't pointed out anything I said. They instead say that you're an ally of Tommy Robinson, who apparently has accused Jews of pushing identity politics over the Holocaust. The man who drapes himself in the Israeli flag.
Well, I mean, I don't drape myself in the Israeli flag, but I mean, I think it's fair to say that Jewish people do use identity politics. I mean, everyone seems to use identity politics.
Yeah, but the idea that, again, Tommy Robinson is anti-Semitic when
No,
he's
Tommy
had,
Robinson is definitely not
he's had
anti-Semitic.
criticisms from people on the right in saying that, like, you're bringing an Israeli flag to like an English national rally, etc., etc. So he's has those arguments all the time.
But again, it's the reverse now. Now it's not. Now it's a condemnation for saying it, for observing a fact, rather than endorsement for observing a fact. It's like, can't you just observe the fact? You know, I'm not making a judgment either way.
Well, this is all about sort of taking the worst interpretation of a person's words, right, and trying to attach people to these taboos, whether it be around anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, whether it be around racism and Jim Crow or about gays in the closet. It's always coming back to those identity taboos. And that's really the core of wokeness as I define it, which is making sacred these historically marginalized groups and their narratives. And that's, if you can key somebody in and tag them with that, then you've won.
Quite, yeah. And then there was another one as well, which I won't really bother with, but this is the Ian Gribbin one. I believe that this was something to do with him positing the hypothetical of, I wonder what would have happened if Hitler had made the non-aggression pact with the UK. Would we have been better off?
Wasn't this the overwhelming majority opinion at the time?
Wasn't this what Peter Hitchens basically thought at one point, saying the Second World War had lost Britain?
Its empire? Which,
Yeah.
true.
I mean, I don't even necessarily agree with this, but it's a sort of...
Wasn't it Neville Chamberlain? We're going to have peace in our time.
Yeah.
Like, they literally all thought they were going to be neutral on Hitler. Like,
But have you considered this makes him a national socialist? I mean, it's so boring. So just to wrap up. All right. So apparently,
certainly it makes a British imperialist. I want to remain neutral with Hitler to preserve the empire.
yeah. So reform riddled with Jewish Nazis. All right. So you can't vote for them. So what are the Conservatives offering? I thought we'd finish with this. A little bit of zero seat Schadenfreude. Well, the Conservatives are now actively telling their candidates to apologise for being Tories.
What?
Yeah, so this is an internal
Well, I agree,
CCHQ. This is a CCHQ document that got leaked to Julia Hartley-Brewer, friend of the show, and she says, we've compiled template letters, scripts, endorsement letters, and endorsement scripts for you to use from now until polling day. So they're controlling the messaging as tightly as possible. The messaging in all of these has been tested and validated. Trust the experts. These letters and scripts will help you get across to voters the choice at this election. Say, you understand people's frustrations with the Tories. You've often shared them. Hey, I get you hate us. I do too. Vote Conservative.
Amazing.
I mean, that's not great, is it?
Amazing
not the best,
framing.
Not the best selling pitch.
Imagine getting that from CCHQ being like, look, yeah, we suck, and you've got to admit that we suck to the electorate. Everyone hates us, but you've just got to say it and get them to vote for us anyway.
Well, do you know who might get them to vote for them? The man who did mass immigration and lockdowns. They've wheeled Boris out off of this family holiday to do pre-written letters to hand out to various candidates. The problem is that Rishi Sunak said that this was coordinated by CCHQ, and now loads of MPs have come out and said, well, I haven't been told about this. I haven't got this. Boris isn't endorsing me, etc., etc. So they're either playing favourites or it's a real car crash. And then the other problem as well is that there are now rumours circulating around Westminster, which I can repeat, that David Cameron wants to be the next Tory party leader. He's going to ask to be parachuted into a by-election after the election.
I tell you what, Farage had better make him lose that. Like, if Farage can crush Cameron, that'd be great.
Yeah, quite.
But it is worth saying, though, there is still, this is what amazes me, right? I mean, a lot of people still think Boris is a populist, and a lot of Tory voters. And he actually has an appeal. And this is what's a bit frustrating, right? Is, policy-wise, he's been a disaster. Mass immigration, done nothing on woke, etc. All the things that actually annoy Tory voters, he's been the architect of. And yet, they don't blame him. And in some cases, they think he's the opposite of what he is. So we also have to, I think, many Tory voters do need to look at themselves in the mirror a little bit and say, why am I being drawn in by a huckster like this?
But Boris embodies the sort of like old English Tory that they want to think is in charge and is being responsible. He's kind of bumbling, but he's good-hearted. He's got a fantastic patter. He's very charismatic. He's likable. I like Boris when I'm hearing him talk and stuff like that. But you are completely correct. He's been on the wrong side of every issue since he got elected. And it's like, God, why are you doing any of these things? You could be super popular if you just did the right thing.
Well, the reason he won in 2019 is because, frankly, Farage stood candidates down to allow him to win. So why the Conservative Party think that budget Farage, who also doesn't have any Farage's policies or his credibility, is going to win people back from Farage himself, I think is mad. And so now what you've got, the Conservatives aren't exactly offering very much in terms of strength here. The final thing I just bring you on to is this is the id of the actual Tory party. We've got losers telling them how to lose more. So Suella telling the party that they must embrace Farage. I mean, Farage at this point.
Why would he need the Conservative Party?
Behind the scenes channels was that it looked like at one point it was going to go one way and that Farage thought he'd fold himself into the Tories. But basically he's come back, absolutely stormed it. And now he's telling Suella and Jenrick to fold back in. And there were rumours, murmurings about defections before standing as a candidate, but now some of them have chosen not to. But we've got Tobias Ellwood and former West Midlands mayor who then lost Andy Street, whatever it is, who's saying that, we must win from the centre ground. It's like, mate, your polling actually can't really get much lower. If they listen to you, they're stupid. So far right doesn't work. Hello to all the Reform candidates watching us. You're doing a great job, lads. And don't listen to clowns like the One Nation Tories of Tobias Ellwood, who are going to deliver 0 seats.
I mean, I'd love to know what the centre ground consists of this point. Like, what we need to say in the centre? Okay, what are you arguing for? A continuation of mass immigration, a continuation of wokeism, a continuation of everything that we've had for the last 15 years that's been a terrible disaster. Like, what's the positive case for what you want?
Well, I think it's basically an economic market liberalism with essentially the woke agenda and mass immigration. There are
the worst of all worlds.
Market pragmatism with gay race communist characteristics, basically.
Yeah, but you have parties like this, on the continent, right? And like Germany has the FDP. I mean, I know they're not super woke, but you have a party that's a market liberal party. They get a small number of votes. And that would probably be where this party would settle out. There is a small market for a kind of market liberal, culturally liberal party. It's just that most voters are going to go towards the cultural conservative alternative. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't even mind a sort of blue Labour, sort of protectionist view on the economy.
So the SDP.
Yeah, I'm not terribly opposed to it. Like, I'm not a massive free marketeer. I'm more committed to property ownership than markets.
That's where most people are.
Yeah, exactly. That's where
Scrutonian.
Far more Scrutonian. So I'd get along a lot better with the SDP types than I would radical Thatcherite Tory rogue. It's like, sorry, you guys are like the Steve Bakers of the world.
Right.
I view them as awful in every way, shape, or form. And if they lose on election day, I'm going to cheer. But anyway. Hi, folks. Thanks for watching. You can watch the entire podcast, The Lotus Eaters, live at 1 p.m. only on lotuseats.com. And while you're there, you could sign up for £5 a month if you want to support us, help us keep the lights on, because, of course, we're demonetized on YouTube. And you can watch Dan Tubbs's amazing Brokenomics series, where he breaks down everything economic and various other things beside. It's excellent stuff, and we appreciate all the support. Thanks very much.